Hello, welcome to section 3. In this section, we're going to pay attention to database and the magic of Django ORM. So we're going to learn how to connect our Python to a database with object relational mapping. So by the end of this week, you will define your data structure as a Python class in models. You use your Django's ORM to store and retrieve that data from database without writing SQL code and display it dynamically on your website. So you should be able to, at the end of this course, dynamically display data directly from your database to your website. Right, let's get into it. First, in the previous section or earlier sections, you realize or you notice how that, for example, in the last section, we had a part of the code where we had to manually define the context. We had to put in stuff like looping, inheritance, and all of that from the context. Now, that is a bottleneck because it makes our website static, such that the content is hard-coded in either HTML, CSS, or even on the code. We can't update the code, the website, without changing the code. And this is limited in flexibility for content management. So a database makes it possible to have a dynamic website such that it can store content. We can use it and retrieve this content or data with Django ORM, and we can of course update content without changing the code. So that's the beauty of it. And at the end of this section, what we expect to have learned how to define data structures in Python classes, which we refer to as models, how to use Django ORM to interact with the database, and how to create and modify database schemas with migrations, and then display database content dynamically on the website. So this is the essence of this section. Before we even dive in, first question is, what is a database? Now, you could liken a database to a giant Excel sheet that stores data. Remember what a data is? A data is a transmittable information, a digitally transmittable information. And as long as this is transmittable digitally, it means that this could be referred to as a data. Now, the storage of where this is stored could be referred to as a database. Now, there are different kinds of databases out there, and while we progress in this course, we're going to see a whole lot of them. This database makes it possible for us to store data and retrieve it using Django ORM within our code. Now, to create a model, to proceed, we need to understand also what a model is. Now, a model is a Python class that represents a table in your database. Having understood what a database is used for, now inside of the database, data is stored in tables, and a model in Django, as we call it, is used to represent a table in that database. So each attribute of this class model represents a field in the table. Let that sink in. Right. Now, the blueprint analogy. When you treated classes, if you did Python, or even if you didn't, you remember that your object, when you did your OOP in Python, object-oriented programming, you recall that classes are actually likened to as a blueprint, such that with this blueprint, it helps you make other versions of that model. So within the Python space, we refer that to as a class. And with this class, we're able to generate different objects that have a primary blueprint of that class. So in Django, this is referred to as model to store tables in your database. So in this table, each field within that class model represents a field in that table, right? So you can imagine a house. When an architect prepares a blueprint for a house, he hands it over. This contains the structure and all of that, and then he hands it over to people that are responsible for building. And then this house is brought from the blueprint to be replicated into multiple units of that similar blueprint. So this is the same case scenario that happens within Django and in Python. So here is a snippet showing you a typical example of the model. So let's dive right into it. In your Pages app, you have a file already there called models. So to create your model, you remember it's a class. So class post, let's have post. Then we inherit from Django's models dot inherit Django models class. So we have a title field, we have a content field, and then we have a created at field. Then we customize the string function that's responsible for returning or having a name representation depending on what you set it to. So in this case, we're setting it to title. You can also have it to be, you could set it as such self dot created that, then we close this such that the response when you query this is going to come representing each instance of this post model as the title dash the date it was created. Now each of these represents a field in Django model. Let's try to dissect this a bit. We have the title field, we have the content field, we have the created at field. Each of these we are expected to define of what format should this be stored in the database. That's the essence of our char field and our text field and the date time field. This tells Django that what we intend to store to the database is a data type of text, and when there is char field, it means it's limited to 255. When it's a text field, it means it's a text but not limited. Now the created at, we have dot datetime field used to represent a field expecting to take in the normal calendar dates with time. With this, we've been able to understand how we came about this as a model, what each of these represents, and how it is stored to the database, and of course the data type expected of it. After doing this, we need to understand one other concept of which we call migrations. Now, migrations are Django's way of propagating changes on fields to your models, maybe adding a field or even creating a new model, adding a field, deleting a model, etc. into your database schema. Remember the earlier analogy we looked at of a house and then the architect having the blueprint. Now, in this case, It's like updating the blueprint and then sending the construction team instructions on how to modify the building. Can imagine after you've done the initial blueprint and then there are changes that you need to make to adjust the look of the building, or however, after you made these changes, you write instructions to the construction team telling them that this is how you're going to implement this correction. That is how Django migrations work. When you create your model, the first thing to do after that is that you need to create instructions that would help it migrates or push the data to your database, or to push the schema to your database. So this is what we call making migration in Django. Let's look at this practically. Now that we've created our models, so at any point when you've created your models, when you're modifying your fields, when you're deleting a model, you're modifying any field, the first thing to do after that is to make your migrations. So Python manage the make migrations. So once you make migrations, you will notice something, that here a file appears. You can see an automatically generated file by Django on the date and then the time. You see this contains the fields we defined on our model. Also note that for every model you create in Django and you don't customize the ID to any format of your choice, Django assigns an automatic big auto field ID to that model. So you can see this file was created by Django. You shouldn't edit this file. It's created by Django, and then after doing this, you can see that these are instructions guiding on how to actually write the schema to the database. So to now finally write the schema to the database, we're going to run python manage.py migrate. Beautiful. Now you see that all of these migration files are migrated to the database. Let's find out our apps. We have only one app that we're utilizing, that we created locally, and that's what was migrated here. So you could wonder, all these other files, where are they coming from? When you check your installed apps, remember that Django has a lot of battery. It has a lot of help for you. So because of that, there are some things that were done already on the background. So some of which includes what you see here. So some of these files, then the auth apps and all of that, that are responsible for handling some background processes for you. So this is literally what the make migration does and what the migrate does. So finally, or next rather, we're going to have a look at the Django admin site. So the Django admin site is like a CRM, as content resource management, where every model you create and you register it in your admin file, you have the leverage to view this and make any edits of your choice. Let's get into it. Having created this in my models, what I need to do next to have it appear on my Django admin is to register it. Admin.site.register. Then I register my post model. Then I import it. I register my post model. Now after I have registered it, I can visit. At this point, this should explain to you where this URL is routing to. So when we get to our page, we have admin. You see, it shows us an entire wonderful interface. So how do we actually get in here? Anybody within a platform that can get access to the admin panel is most likely the super user. Now, the super user, to create that, we are going to run python manage.py create super user. Now, it prompts you to enter a username. I'm going to go with my name, then an email address, said not valid. We'll correct that. Want to have a simple password. For the purpose of this test, you can see the warning if you should bypass password validation and create. So I've selected yes, and then with these credentials, I am able to log in. But if I don't have any super user account, you'll notice that I can't access that page. You see, the post model is shown here because we have no post at the moment. It's empty. So on this admin page, you can literally create a post. Let's create a post. Let's get some random text from lorem ipsum. So with lorem ipsum, you can generate random text. Let's have 5 paragraph generate. So with this, let's have this to be the title and put it here. Then we'll copy this, then place it here, and we save. You can see that this appears, and notice the structure or the format that this is shown. That's to remind you of the string we customized here, which is responsible for adding a name representation to the instance. Now, having understood that, let's dive in. Now, let's actually start to make queries from our Python code to our database. Now, I would like to try this out on my shell. So clear this. So your shell is more like an interactive environment within your code that you can run your Python script. So to enter my Django, and I want to make sure that this shell is within the Django environment. So to do this, all I need to do, let's clear this off. Python manage.py shell. So with this, I'm displayed or shown an interactive console. So first thing we would want to do is to actually get everything within our post model. Let's see the status of the database at the moment. To do that, let's call this posts. Going to reference, or before then, let's import our post model from pages, which is this and this dot models import post. Okay, we have an error because we're making a slight mistake. Post. So that thing's imported. We can go ahead to create a variable and store all the posts in the database. And to get all the posts, you call your post model, which is the class, dot object dot all. So this grabs all the post entries or instances inside of our database, and it's stored in our post. So let's try to print post. you see that we have the one we created earlier on the admin dashboard. So let's create imsum opsum lorem imnom. So we have to place this in, then we save. When we check this out, let's print our post again. You see that it's 1 and then 2. Now this is how you query all instances or all objects stored in a model in a database. Also, you could want to retrieve a particular or a singular model. Remember I told you that Django automatically assigns an ID when you don't have an ID field. So when it assigns, it's a big odd field, or you could say your numbers. So we can actually retrieve a particular post. Let's say post equals post dot object dot get. Then you can get by any of the fields as long as it's just one occurrence within the database. Else you would want to use filter. So let's say ID equals 1. So we have that first. So we expect it to print only the post with an ID of 1. Like you see, it's printed the first one. Now, you might also want to create a post entry. To do that, let's say post create a variable, let's say, or you can simply do post dot object dot create. Then you include all the fields. Let's have it title. Could say title is equals to, let's say, Samuel life in a sentence, right? So you also want to include the content field, and we have it here. Hello, this is working so fine. Having that, we go ahead and post, and you see that this is created. In case you're confused or wondering if it was, so we go ahead and reprint our post. You see that this gets included. Also on your Django admin, you notice this gets included. Right, so with this we've been able to use our Python code to actually interact with our database. We've seen how to retrieve all the data from a model. We've seen how we can get a particular data from a model, an instance of a model, and we've seen query search results. Now that we've understood how to work with this on Python, the next point of call should actually be integrating this to our views and then utilizing it within our templates. Let's proceed. So I would like we have now we can have a better still, okay, yeah, we could have a file post.html, and then let's extend our base. We extend our base template. Let's get the something similar to this, and then We have it here. We extend our base template. Here we have post page. Then we want to have all post. Then this page returns all of the posts from the database lessons. With this, we can actually go ahead, and of course you should know that as long as this is going to be coming from the database, it could be multiple. So we have for posts in posts and post. So we're going to, in our views, create a view for post page view. So we actually want to render a template. So we have, remember always to pass request. So we have post.html. Now we add a URL and ensure it's working. But post, then we have post page view, right? So we can go ahead to check this out. But before then, I would love to include this on my nav bar. I like to include this on my nav bar, right? And call it post. Hope that's correct. Let's find out. We'll close all of this so that we get to see more space. So we have this on the URLs of posts. So let's correct that. Post this post. All right. Now let's first check and be sure that our page is not having any malfunction. So we see the post appear on the nav bar and then we can access it, but we run into an error. It says template does not exist. So it's our responsibility now to find out what could be breaking it. Say our post template. Okay, we had a slight error with the spelling. So when we go to this, we correct this to posts, and with that you see that this works. So all posts, this page returns all of the posts from the database lesson, right? So let's pass in the context. Before then, remember how to query your database. So we're going to have it now to be post equals post the object dot all, and we import our object here, or rather our post model. Then we go ahead to add this comfortably as a key and as a value on our view. So when we get to this, we expect that it should refresh with the new format. You see that all of the data we've added to this database is updated, right? So let's have to also, so we have this. Yes, we also might want to have this sorted in a descending order. So to achieve that, you can simply have ordered by created date. So this sorts it by the earliest first. You see that this has come to be the first on the list. That is what your ordering is used for. Right, let's proceed. So we've seen how to utilize what our database is. We've seen the Django ORM. We've seen how to use it within our view, and of course how to update it on our template. Be mindful also that you can actually call this as in the title in like manner. So we could go to a site. You see that this is reduced to only the titles. So congratulations, you've come to the end of the section. And this section capstone project is that you're to improve on your microblog. Make sure it's more robust. You're going to define your models, practice this yourself, run your migration, set up your admin, add the sample data, modify your view template and responses, and of course style it more if you prefer to. So this week we've been able to create models, learn it in detail. We've talked about database, we've talked about super users and Django admin, how to view your posts, all of the posts from the database, or interacting with the database from your Python code to your template. See you in the next section.